Labour made big promises during their election campaign, promises of change, progress, and a better future. But now, after coming to power, they've gone back on almost all of them. In a fiery exchange in Parliament, Shadow Chancellor Mel Stride didn't hold back. He exposed the harsh reality of the Labour government, calling out their failures and broken commitments. Stride even went as far as to say that Keir Starmer and Reeves are now the biggest obstacles to economic growth, arguing that their leadership is doing more harm than good. And how did Labour respond? Instead of addressing the concerns, they resorted to the usual political blame game, pointing fingers at the Conservatives rather than owning up to their mistakes. Watch this clip and decide for yourself, are Starmer and Reeves steering the country in the right direction, or is it time for real accountability?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Chief Secretary told us that growth is the #1 mission of this government, and he added, now we must go faster, which I have to tell him suggests a certain lack of ambition. What we do not need, Mr. Speaker, is some hasty manana moment of unquantified, vague promises of a better tomorrow. We need action now to reverse the grievous damage this Chancellor has wrought just in her first 6 months in office. So the first question I have is, why did the government deliver a budget which the independent OBR said would lead to lower growth, higher inflation, higher interest rates and would cost jobs?
Exactly right.
And I have to tell the right honourable gentleman that going for growth in the 2030s means nothing to the businesses who have already stopped hiring, shed workers or put up prices thanks to Labour's ruinous policies. Mr. Speaker, it is hard to escape the conclusion that these announcements have been hastily cobbled together by a government which is under increasing pressure to change course but is seemingly incapable of doing so. So I ask the right honourable gentleman, why have these announcements only come now, when the Labour Party had years in opposition and had months in government leading up to its first budget? Now, Mr. Speaker, if the government really did want to unleash investment, innovation and the private sector, they should not have decided in the autumn to substantially increase the tax burden and the size of the state. By doing so, far from encouraging private investment, they are actively squeezing it out. So can I ask the Chief Secretary to reassure businesses right now that there will be no further growth-destroying fiscal measures, including tax rises, in the spring statement? Mr. Speaker, is not the truth that the damage is already being done? That is the case even before the party opposite's tax rises bite in April. The economy is flatlining. That is happening right now. So I ask the right honourable gentleman, will any of these announcements actually have an impact within this Parliament? And what impact are they likely to have, if any, on the OBR's forecasts in March? Mr. Speaker, incredibly, the Chancellor said in her speech that businesses are what drive growth and the government should support them. Yet this is a government that has driven business confidence off a cliff, taxed it to the hilt, and through its upcoming employment legislation will be hitting them still further and with ever more job-destroying red tape. So can the Chief Secretary set out what the overall impact of government policy decisions since July has been on regulatory costs for businesses? And does he agree with the Business Secretary's extraordinary utterance on the media this morning that the government has not hammered businesses? The Chancellor claimed this morning she has seen no alternative suggestions from the opposition. Let me give her one now. Last year, the Conservative manifesto included £12 billion in welfare savings. At the time, the Labour Party said the money simply isn't there. Now we are told that the government will shortly be coming forward with plans for welfare reform, another Damascene conversion. Mr. Speaker, if they had grasped this issue when they came into office, they could have tackled the rising welfare bill rather than taxing jobs and killing growth. Their failure to act means that businesses and millions of people are paying the price. So can the right honourable gentleman today commit to matching that £12 billion? Or can he at least tell us the scale of savings we can expect from his promised reforms? Mr. Speaker, some of the announcements made today are of course welcome. The role of the opposition is not to oppose for opposition's sake, not least Not least because many of the measures are reheated from the previous Conservative government. The plans on pension investment, for example, seem oddly familiar to us, probably because they were simply to continue the reforms that I was bringing in when I was Secretary of State at Work and Pensions. But even here, we must wait and see before passing judgment, because the fact of the matter is this government have shown we simply cannot trust their word. They promised not to raise taxes, they did. They promised not to cut winter fuel payments, they did. They promised not to borrow more, and they did. We need to see action, not just words. Mr. Speaker, the Chancellor talks about removing barriers to growth. Oh yes, she talks about it. But this talk comes from the same person whose budget killed the economy and growth, stone dead. If we are looking to remove the greatest barriers to growth in this country, perhaps we should start with the Prime Minister and the Chancellor of the Exchequer.
Chief Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I mean, look, the House is indebted to the Shadow Chancellor, Mr. Speaker. A lecture from Mr. Momentum himself on the need for speed from this government. Well, let me tell him that in the last 6-7 months, this government's done more than that lot did in the last 14 years. Mr. Speaker, and he's asked me, Mr. Speaker, he's asked me about our plans working with business. The comments from business leaders and investors today speak for themselves, Mr. Speaker. Our plans are welcome from business and we'll be working in partnership with them to deliver for this country. And he asked me about work, Mr. Speaker. Look, the Labour Party makes no secret of the fact that we like to support people into work. That's why we were created in the first place. Strong, secure work, with rights at work, with secure incomes to help make your family finances add up. But the real truth in the data, Mr. Speaker, is under the last government, too many people were waiting at home sick, unable to get their NHS appointment, unable to get access to mental health services so that they could be helped back into work. Too many people were waiting at home, waiting for training, unable to be able to seize the opportunities advertised in front of them. This Labour government will not take that as a luxury. We will work at speed to give people the work that they deserve. And Mr. Speaker, I think the heart of the Shadow Chancellor's statement was a truth for the country to consider. That under the last administration, it was promises cancelled, and under this administration, it's promises being delivered.
It seems like Labour has no real answers, just endless finger-pointing at the Tories. Instead of taking responsibility and delivering on their promises, they keep shifting the blame while the people of the UK wait for real action. Is this the most disappointing government in the country's history? Are we seeing leadership, or just excuses? If you agree, hit the like button and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's get the conversation going.